Hi, Cliff Sewell. Welcome to another episode of The Magical Mindset. My guest today, fascinating character, James Collier, one of the original founders of Huel, and we'll talk about them as an organisation and how we best describe what Huel are, meal replacement, nutritional products. We'll talk about that, and also we're going to talk about his new book, Well Fed, and I think we're going to go into lots and lots of intriguing conversations around business, around James and his background, and around fitness and mindset and all those things. Fascinating meeting. Can't wait to get on with this one.
I'm not a strictly daily routine guy. Sure, I set myself goals and targets and I stick to them. I'm pretty good at getting 7 workouts a week in. That doesn't mean training every day. Are there certain things you can do less of to create more time? Yeah, there are. But you've got to be honest with yourself. It's one thing to eat it, but to just throw it away strikes me as morally questionable.
First of all, welcome, James, to the Magical Mindset podcast.
Great to be here, Cliff. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to talk about. We'll get into, as we go through, we'll talk about, you've just released your book, which is, it's getting some real impact, isn't it? You know, it's all over the place at the moment, and I keep seeing it everywhere because I'm looking, but it is a fascinating book, and I think it's what the world needs at the moment, isn't it?
I hope so, and I hope it's getting some traction. I haven't had any figures. Look, I come from Huel, right, and we're all about figures and metrics. My publishers have told me off not to focus on the figures, but I can't. I have to know figures. You'll probably relate to that.
Oh, God, absolutely. I'm learning that all along now. But we'll talk about the book. We will absolutely 100% talk about Huel. And I'm not just saying this because you're on the show. I'm a Huel fan. Because of my background, I need discipline, and I have to get up early in the morning and I have to train. And I looked at all sorts of ways of getting my diet right and fitness right. And then I realized, just simplify it. Go and find a product that makes it really simple. And then there's no excuses around lunchtime. Lunchtime's really easy for me. I know what I'm having. It's Huel, and that's it. But we'll talk about that later. As we talked just offline before we started, people will look at your book. They'll look at the success you've had in Huel, and they'll maybe sit back and go, yeah, well, that's all right for James. You know, he's already successful. He's already made it. What I want to do is bring to life you, the person. So can you just tell us the story, where it all started, childhood, youth, and how you've ended up where you are today? Then we'll get into some details.
Yeah, sure, and I will. I just want to focus on that one word, successful. What does it mean? Right? It's a subjective term, right? What one person deems as successful, someone else might have a different opinion on. Okay, do I see myself as successful? Well, I look for it from a third person perspective, and people might think so, but I haven't achieved half of what I want to achieve yet.
We could spend the next 45 minutes just on that one subject, but we're not going to. And you are literally, it's what I talk about all the time. It's exactly right. What is success?
Yeah, but I want to frame that because I want people to realise, and I'll get to something if people want to understand me a bit better. I'll get to a point and that'll become obvious why I've made that point early on. So what's my background? Okay, grew up relatively normal, whatever normal means. I was very fortunate that my parents, although they both came from backgrounds where money was hard to come by and life was hard, they themselves were what would be quite successful, and they had a successful business in partnership together, in the glass fibre industry of everything. Now, when I was 8 years old, my mum was diagnosed with what I later found out to be terminal breast cancer, and they sat me down and told me, first time I'd heard the C word. I didn't really know what it meant, and I didn't know it was terminal at the time, of course, but Mum did have brilliant treatment for what treatment was like for cancer in the 80s. You've got to remember that it's nothing like it was now. But she also changed her diet and lifestyle quite a lot. And she started adopting a vegetarian diet, and also took some supplements and other tonics, that things I find highly questionable now, sort of thing I fight against. But she also changed the mindset and took on meditation and things. Now, there was definitely a lot of talk around good nutrition around the dinner table. So Dad and me, we weren't vegetarians, but we definitely had good food. And my dad, by the way, is still alive and very much kicking today at 80 years old. Great inspiration to me, actually. And my mum died when I was 19, but she saw me get to my first year to study nutrition at university. So the other reason that I generally put down to why I did nutrition rather than anything else, because incidentally, when I did my A-levels, I did economics and got an A grade. So I was almost going to do economics, and that would have been the sensible thing to do. But I went with my passion and did nutrition.
Can I just? I try desperately hard not to interrupt, but then I hear little things. You just said something there. You got a super result in economics, but you went with your passion. Th- That is something I'm always telling people to do. Go with the passion. If you look at where you are now, going with that passion, there's no question it was the right thing to do, wasn't it? It's got you through, got you through, got you through.
And having a bit of understanding of economics in the background might have helped as well, right? Yeah, no, absolutely, it is. And that's generally what I always say. Like, it turns out I did do the rational thing, going with my passion. I try to live my life through rationality, by the way. But the other thing was I was quite a wimpy kid, weren't we all? I got bullied a bit. Okay, I went to private school, so the bullying probably wasn't as hard as some kids had it, but it definitely affected me a lot. I think I've still got some issues with it today. But I did found, my best friend, who was a couple of years older than me, he started training at a gym. And so when I was 16, I caught the bug from him, started going to the gym, and it wasn't that long, and I sprouted some little muscles, and I decided I didn't want to be bullied anymore. And I then thought, well, I want to do everything I could to get bigger muscles. And as the saying goes, knowledge is power. I thought, well, let's go and study this at university. Was one of the reasons, because, and it definitely helped that I wanted to get into nutrition. Then at university, I did nutrition and dietetics. So that the normal thing was to go and work in the NHS as a dietitian. So I did. I always kind of knew it probably wasn't for me long term, but I'm glad I did it, because I've had some brilliant experience. But while working at the NHS, it doesn't pay very well, does it? It's probably still not these days. So I started working on the doors as a pub and club bouncer as well, with a local agency. I got kind of recruited from the gym. A lot of my friends there were doing it. I thought it'd be kind of cool. But listen, I was never a fighting guy. I got quite big at that point. I was quite a lump, and but I did it, and it was very character building in some senses. But in others, it really wasn't. So this was an example of my, so I was working a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night on the doors, and I was typically working in pubs and bars. So I generally finished by 12. It wasn't ridiculously late. But Thursday night, I would be maybe at 11:30 throwing someone out of a pub who was pissed up. And then 9 a.m. on Friday morning, I was with a little old lady on the wards, helping her have her sip feeds because she was undernourished. That was a real mind mess. Really, it wasn't good, and I had some real mental health issues at that time. I'd had a history of depression anyway as a teenager, and I've still got some nervous tics these days. And anxiety was never an issue for me, actually. We all get anxious, right? So, of course, I had a normal level of anxiety, but I did get depression on and off. I didn't know it at the time. And during my door years, which was on and off probably several years, it wasn't good for my mental health. I met some good friends. I had a lot of laughs, and it was definitely character building, but it wasn't good in many senses. It's a very macho environment, right? Very egotistical environment.
Right. I think that when you say wasn't good, in what reason? Because it was so macho and so aggressive. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I was never sort of, it had its in crowd and it had its not in crowd. And I was probably one of the not in crowd, but I was generally liked, I think, by everyone, but it was just sort of, some of the other guys would just like go up to each other randomly and punch each other in the shoulder, right? And then later on, when you're unsuspecting, someone else would do it. You get it back, or you just be on the receiving. You're sitting there drinking your coffee on the door, and suddenly your coffee will go over because one of your mates is laughing his head off after just punched you in. But it's not good, is it? Really, looking back, I can see why you do it. But on the other hand, Sunday mornings we'd all get together in one of the rooms of one of the pubs and just have a bit of practicing sparring, which was very good. it's camaraderie. And people like me who weren't such a good fighter, they teach me different skills on how to hold myself and things like that. So that was really good. So there was a lot of camaraderie as well, which I think is pretty cool. So just sort of touching on there, really, but I did stop working on the doors in the end, especially when all the new licensing stuff came in. I wasn't bothered with all that. And by that time, I'd moved on to having my own businesses, and I'd moved out of the NHS. So my own businesses were this. I was a freelance nutritionist where I'd see people for face-to-face dietary advice, online advice, meal plans for care homes. I do. They were quite a good earner. Seminars, writing, anything really, but it was never my main income. I started in 2000 with my friend, who's still one of my best friends today, a website called muscletalk.co.uk. And it was
there's a little point I want to pick up. I wanted to let you talk about that. But again, this is something I hear back when I'm talking to people. So you've gone to university, you've got yourself a career effectively as a nutritionist within the NHS. And I'm sure there were other opportunities in the private sector that you could have carried on. But you made that decision to go alone, to set up our own business, to be independent, to be an entrepreneur, if we want to use that word. Let's be cautious with that word. Lots of people will say, yeah, but I can't do that. I've got to pay the bills. I can't take that risk. Was it your parents, because they were business people, did that help you along? Or if somebody's listening and going, yeah, I love what James is saying, I love where James has got to, but I just can't take that leap to go and do it by themselves, would you give any advice, or how were you feeling at that point?
I always knew that I was going to have my own business, right? I like the word you use the word entrepreneur cautiously, because I agree. It probably, my parents' mindset had rubbed off. Mum had passed away by this time, of course. Dad was living in Africa by this point. He lived, he's back in the UK now, but he lived there for about 20 years. But I thought, yeah, I want to. And I was very lucky. Had a really good boss in the NHS, and she let me go part-time while I set stuff up. So that was really good. But there was a point where I thought, even that stability of having the mortgage paid and food on my plate, that would be gone. But I was still working the doors, so I had a bit of a supplementary income. So that's how I did it in the end. I quit the NHS altogether. Had the doors. Muscle Talk, the website I was just about to talk about, had started at that point, and we were starting to make a little bit of advertising revenue. So I didn't go from zero to nothing. It was like I probably had a few months where it was probably a bit wobbly, but I was all right. So I was very fortunate. I had a transition rather than a hard out, hard in, if that makes sense. And Muscle Talk was great for a while. Both of the two of us, we had an okay monthly income from it, which paid all the bills after I left the NHS. Put food on our plates and everything, and then if I had any consultancy work, that would be the extra. And then, of course, I think I kind of quit the doors by that point. But then I was always consulting as a background, and then in June 2014, I got what would now be referred to as a life-changing email from this bloke called Julian Hearn. That if anybody knows the Huel story, he's the main founder of Huel, and then I'm co-founder. So he commissioned me to come up with the original formula for the white pouch powder. And I did, and we worked together over the next year, sort of moving the business forward a bit, trying to find someone to blend it for us. And in June 2015, we launched, and Julian said, as we launched, please be my co-founder. And I started some other businesses going on there as well, because when I was in the bodybuilding and fitness world, I was also running shows, mainly bodybuilding, but sometimes strongman as well. And involved in expos, and I had a gym clothing company, and I was dabbling in this, that, and the other. Muscle Talk had become not just a website, but also a physical shop, which was a complete disaster. Yes, and the clothing company was great quality clothing. It's just, it was so good, nobody ever threw it away, so we never sold any more. There's some logic there. And clothing was a bad idea to go into. And there was a couple of other ventures there as well. So I dabbled, but they were all overlapping. They're all sort of nutrition, bodybuilding, something like that. But the consultancy was always running, and it was always consistently there as a little bit extra. But then when Julian got in touch and he paid me to do the original formula, that was great. And the other Muscle Talk by that time was going downhill. Social media had come along, and people were advertising their supplements and their other products on social media rather than on web forums. Forums were beginning to be a thing of the past. So we were really hit, and we were closing the physical shop. The forum was still running and ticking along barely. And the email came in at the right sort of time, really. And then it came as an opportunity for a job, and then I quit my other things altogether. Probably after about 18 months of being involved in Huel. Now we launched in June 2015, and I was about to get married in the August.
Can I just? I'm intrigued. That email, life-changing email, came in. If I was to ask them, why did they come to you?
Why did Julia come? So, having had some conversations with him afterwards, of course, I think he's told me he contacted three nutritionists. I was definitely, I responded very quickly. I used to have the rule that I respond to all my messages within 48 hours, or at least 2 working days. And I was always I struggle now to do it with the amount of messages I get, but I still try to.
Well, I'll back you up on that, because I made contact with you from out the blue on this, and you did. There's lots of people who have ignored me, but you did. You came straight back. You came back with a few questions. I answered the questions, and then you came straight back. So I will yes, you do what you say. You haven't done with me.
I try to. I'm barely holding on at the moment. It's got about 2 hours a day at the moment, and I'm not doing other things, which is something we can get to at the moment. The cost of it, and I'm without a PA. I'm at that conjuncture where I need a PA, but I can't justify a PA. You were talking about taking the plunge. You were talking earlier about going self-employed. I'm probably at that point again now, incidentally, about do I need an assistant? I do.
I think I'm sorry. The answer is yes, you do.
I do.
If you're at that point, and I can see what else you're doing. Yeah, I think now's the time.
Yes, exactly. I like writing, and I'm not writing because I'm answering interesting people like you. But anyway, where was I?
I'd asked the question about why had Huel got in touch with Hugh, and why we talk about luck. I don't believe in luck. The universe is the universe, and it creates situations and opportunities. You must have been doing something right, in the right way, to even appear on their radar.
Yeah, he probably looked me up and looked. I was doing some good work in the bodybuilding and fitness world, although Huel wasn't that sort of product. He contacted me and commissioned me to come up with a formula at the first project, which I probably delivered quite promptly. Looking back, well, I didn't undercharge him. I was about to say I undercharged him because it took me a lot longer than I thought it would, but I did it. I delivered. I had a couple of other tweaks that we spoke after that, met the guy afterwards in person. So he was probably impressed with my work, and then he realised, and we got on as well. I don't know whether that's still the case, but it's, no, it is. Yeah, and I quite enjoyed doing it as well. That was the interesting thing. It was a different project. I'd only developed one product prior to Huel, and that was a pre-workout formula. So it was kind of new, and then we got the co-packers on board, and it sort of progressed from there, really. And there was 2 of us. Fast forward to now, there's about 350 of us in the business globally.
It's a mega brand now, isn't it? I'm not just being polite because I'm talking to you, but it is a mega brand. It's a household name now, isn't it?
I think so. I think we've hit that point, because when you always hear that when comedians sort of mention you as an aside, or you come up in sort of by conversations rather than the principal conversation, that means people just assume everyone knows what Huel is. I think that's quite interesting, and I think we're at that point. So I would probably agree with you there, and that's kind of cool. I don't know whether everyone still understands what Huel is. Some people still think we're a protein shake, which we're not. We're a meal in different formats. But it's quite good, and I work with amazing people. Our recruiting process is probably quite hard and quite lengthy, but then if we retain people, that's a good thing, right? Because you don't have to do it again and again.
Yeah. We'll stay on that, because I think it's important, because I see you see these things on LinkedIn and whatever, and people making fun of people because they have a Huel meal replacement, whatever. So I'll put you on the spot a little bit. For somebody who's looking in and thinking it's a protein shake, because I think people probably will say, in the real world, what is, I have the Huel bottles, it's a meal replacement. What is it, and why should people use it?
Okay. We don't really like the term meal replacement, although I get most people, you prefer to it that. Okay. I could say, Cliff, what are you having for dinner tonight? You might say, oh, I might have fish and chips or a pizza. I mean, hopefully you won't, but you might do. Okay. But you would never say, oh, I might have fish and chips, or I might replace it with a pizza. You wouldn't say, you would say, I'm going to have fish and chips or a pizza or Huel. So the category that Huel comes under and our competitors would be called complete foods. What is a complete food? It's foods that's got all the essential nutrients in it at appropriate levels according to that meal, which have been worked out on what one would have if one were to have 100% Huel in a day. Now, I'm not saying people should do that. In fact, I probably actively dissuade people from doing it, in most circumstances at least. But that's how we calculate it. Now, people will say, quite rightly, but aren't there other things from eating food, like phytonutrients? And yes, there are, but Huel's got phytonutrients as well. But we've taken care and made sure that there's a good amount of all the essential vitamins and minerals, essential fats. There's things that people aren't getting enough of. What about fibre? There's a fibre crisis in the UK. Did you know this? Only 9% of adults in the UK are meeting the recommended daily amount of fibre. This is a problem. And people say, well, fibre is not essential. Well, it is, because it does so many good things other than good digestion, cardiovascular health. What about the microbiome? Helps with cognition and mental health. There's great evidence to show that fibre is important. So we've created our products to be high fibre. Then protein. Everyone talks about protein, but there's a good reason for that. Protein is not just about muscle building. It does help you feel more satiated sooner, helps keep you full up. Also, the caloric availability of protein is lower than the other macronutrients. What do I mean by the term caloric availability? Let me demonstrate. Sugar, for instance, if you have 100 calories worth of sugar, around about 99 of those calories will go on to be utilized by the body. And also it's very tasty, and you can eat it very easily. Protein may be as low as only 70 of those calories will be used if you have 100 calories worth of protein. So that showed it's not all being utilized. It means it helps keep you full up for longer as well, which is really good for most people. And then carbs and fats probably sit somewhere in between, starchy carbs and fats somewhere in between. So that's why protein is useful. So we've got different products that are designed differently with different macro ratios. Some of them are to suit certain goals. Others are there because it's what the products have been made, so they're suitable. Like we have the hot and savoury range, or the noodle pots, which you mix with hot water and eat with a spoon. So people see them as closer to other types of food, if that makes sense, rather than drinking the ready to drinks that most people will be aware of from the supermarkets, petrol stations, or the powdered products, which were our original products, which are probably the ones I'm most proud of, I think, the powders. And we've got different types of powders there now as well.
You're more proud of the powdered product than the bottles?
Yeah. Because, I don't know, probably because it came earlier, and I thought about most. It was the original, they were the original products, and we've managed to improve on them from when we originally launched. We've got to say then, we had one type originally, which is the white pouch. We've also got the black edition now, which is one of our better sellers, which has got the high protein and higher essential fats. And that's really popular, and that's popular with everybody, but also with gym goers. Yeah, and I obviously the powders were made to be convenient, but even some people find them that they want something even more convenient than that. So getting the ready to drinks, which are really tasty. I think my colleagues have made that. We've done a really good job of making them very, very tasty.
So I'm not doing a sales pitch for Huel. I'm a consumer of Huel. So you've got the powders in it, but I have to then take a step back. I use Huel, not because I think it's amazing and it's the best thing in the world, because of my background of addiction and all those things. I realized in my world I had to put structure, real strong, basic, fundamental structure in my life. And that comes right down to how you get up in the morning, to what you eat and what you don't eat and whatever. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to sit there and start preparing 7 days worth of meals and things like that. But I know on a lunchtime now, because I fast in the morning, but I know on a lunchtime, I've got no excuse. I've got a Huel, I've nearly used the word again. I've got a Huel meal in a bottle, right? So therefore, it's not that I'm trying to be a superstar or super fit or super. I just know that's the rule. And actually, in life, when you get in sober, there's a rule: don't drink. When you've been disciplined, there's a rule: do certain things. That's why I use the product. And I don't know whether I'm a normal consumer of Huel, but that's why I use it because it's there, it's good, I know it's right, but it's a discipline.
Huel, there is no normal consumer of Huel, right? There are people like you, loads of people like you, but Huel products are to have as much or as little as you like. We have salespeople go out on the road, for instance. They might be in the office 2 days a week and out on the road 3. They probably only have Huel on those 3 days they're out and about. Brilliant. It suits them. There's other people who want structure like you. Then we've got gym goers and athletes that might benefit from Huel. We know there's paramedics. We know there's builders and other manual workers. Lorry drivers love Huel. They've been told they shouldn't eat so much while they're sitting down. Well, then maybe Huel's suitable. Because the bottles are so readily available in so many supermarkets and petrol stations, they're an easier grab and go and healthier choice than these meal deals, for instance, where you get a sandwich with white bread, packet of crisps and a sugary drink. If you grab a Huel, you've got a better option. And also, it's been designed to be satiating. I've spoken about the fibre and the protein and why they help satiation.
The meal deals, I'm not going to attack people. The meal deals are just not good. Like you say, it's white bread, crisps, and a fizzy drink. And I'm not trying to take fun out of life. Just not good for you.
I don't like to frame anything as good or bad when it comes to individual foods. Okay, and I actually cover this in chapter 3 of Well Fed. I don't want to fearmonger anything. I mean, there are more desirable and less desirable foods. Diets can be good or bad, but I don't like to, say individual foods are. Let's use the meal deal example. Somebody is out and about and they're having a really healthy breakfast, a really healthy evening meal, but they're grabbing a meal deal while they're out and about. That's not going to be disastrous, right? So could they make a better option? Yeah, I've mentioned one, but but if it suits them, that's great. And I don't want to make people feel bad about having any of their food choices.
But we will move off Huel, but I talk about discipline of daily. If people say, I want to be successful, one of the key things for success, whichever it means, or I want to be, or achieve this, you have, one of the key, it's not easy. And the first thing you have to be is disciplined. And nobody's going to achieve anything by not being disciplined and structured. So therefore, yes, it's easy to pick up a meal deal, but no, be structured, be disciplined beforehand. Not, it's now 12 o'clock lunchtime, I need something. That should have been thought about the day before.
Yeah. Discipline isn't all or nothing, though. And I think I want to give an example here. What does everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people do at the beginning of January? They start going to the gym, they start eating better, dry January, maybe veganuary, and they start all these things in one go. Well, the 1st of Feb, most people have stopped because they've set themselves up for failure. They've tried to change too much in one go. I love the concept of habits. I love the micro habit concept. Atomic Habits by James Collier is an amazing book, an amazing way of framing it. I quite like the let's start one new habit a month thing, because if you start a habit and you do it every day for a month, it's more likely to become normal for you, and then it just becomes something that's ingrained. It becomes a sort of a non-conscious decision. On one level, I realise what I've said then is probably up for debate, but and then start another habit, and you can build on the habits, and then you can create discipline. Now, everybody's interpretation of discipline is different. I'm hearing what you're talking about, Cliff, and I'm probably I have a different concept of that. I'm not contrary to what some people believe, I'm not a strictly daily routine guy. Sure, I set myself goals and targets and I stick to them. I'm pretty good at getting 7 workouts a week in. That doesn't mean training every day. For instance, Huel HQ is quite a drive for me, and we're so lucky we have a gym at work. So if I go in early, I miss the traffic and train before work. And I train after work and miss the traffic before I come home. So that really suits me, but I'm only in once or twice a week. But then I've been to the gym already this morning. I'll go for a run later. But I just because I'm in London quite a bit and I don't live in London, I'm doing things like this on a podcast. My weekly diary is all over the shop. So I have to put the workouts in where they suit, and they're rarely at the same time. As for eating, I don't have a routine for that. Like you, I like the whole morning fasting thing. So I'll eat sometime in the evening, and even that last time I eat might vary. depending on what I'm doing, what time I get home. But I generally don't eat till lunchtime, and I like it because it's one less thing to worry about in the morning. I'm not wholly convinced about the direct physiological benefits of fasting over and above normal calorie restriction or normal macro goals and things like that. I'm not saying there isn't any, but I'm just saying there's no unique benefit. But what I do quite like about it is the discipline side of it, right? We in the West are so spoiled and privileged, we don't even realize it. And everything comes easy. And especially, especially some of us where money's not so much of an issue. Anybody's got a stable job and it's got enough food on the plate and a roof over their head and paying the mortgage, etc. You are privileged. People might not accept that, but I think it's important to remind ourselves. So to do things sometimes that are out of our comfort zone. So we're at 10:30 now. I'm pretty hungry. I can smell the porridge, right? And I could do with some, but I won't eat for another couple of hours because it's part of discipline. So it's not a massive thing either, right? I'm not going to starve to death, right? There are people in, say, Ukraine at the moment who are struggling to eat and they're being shot at. That's proper stress. But there's a few little things that we can do, even though we're still fundamentally in control, but just to remind ourselves that these things don't come easy to us. So another one is the things like the cold plunges or cold showers, right? Am I convinced about the direct physiological benefits of them? Not really. Okay, some people would argue me about that. Some of these scientists might have a different opinion, but I don't think there's any particular strong, unique benefits. But there are benefits because getting in a winter's day, getting in a cold plunge, it's fucking hard, right? Sometimes.
I'm gonna confess, I am disciplined. I will fast. I will not do things. Literally, and whether you class this as fail, I don't care what you call it, can't do it. Literally, just can't do it. Well, no, I can do it. Absolutely. But I talk to myself probably every week saying I'll do this one day. It is just something I fundamentally dislike.
Here's a tip: start in summer when it's not as cold, and then it won't be so bad. When winter's there, I won't say you'll be used to it, but you'll be one level more used to it. Okay. And I haven't done it for a while. I do the cold shower every morning, absolutely, because it's easy. But going out there in my pants outside the garden, the neighbours are probably missing something, me not going out, but it's, it does, but it's uncomfortable. And what the point I'm trying to make there is trying to embrace these things that are uncomfortable, just to remind us that we live in the privileged West. That's all I'm trying to do. So is there some benefit to mindset? Yes, but I would say it's because it's uncomfortable. And this is why I'm like you, I don't do nearly enough of these things. I exercise a lot. Do I exercise as hard as some people? Absolutely not. I've trained with top pro bodybuilders and strongmen. I know what it takes. I know what a hard workout looks like. And I know I'm not doing it. People might look at me at the gym and go, oh, that bloke's training pretty hard. And probably, relatively speaking, I am. But can I train harder, more disciplined? Yes. But it's a zero-sum game, right? If I'm down the gym for longer, then I ain't going to be back here writing. There literally are only 24 hours in a day. And people can say, or find the time. Oh, I don't buy that mindset at all. You have to be objective with it, right? Sure. Are there certain things you can do less of to create more time? Yeah, there are. But you've got to be honest with yourself. And I'm also, one other thing, and this is important actually when it comes to discipline. If you're feeling generally shitty, right, or you're pushed for time because you've got something genuine going on, and I call genuine meeting a friend. I think that's okay. It's okay to miss a workout or have a shorter workout. But if you're just going to put your feet up and have TV, that doesn't count. Do you see what I mean? So you've got to be true to yourself. You've got to be realistic. We do live in this privileged West. And if you want to be one of those ultra athletes and train for 4 hours a day, that's fine. But if you are feeling unwell and you work out, it could make you worse. It could inhibit your progress, or you've got an injury. So you've got to be realistic with yourself, but not as an excuse. It's finding the right balance between being realistic and being true to yourself.
Okay. Talk about the book. Let's talk about the book then, because I think that's really important about what else we're talking about. Just headline about the book. Why did you write it? What you're trying to achieve?
I wrote it for a few reasons. Look, when we were at Huel, I'm a human nutrition background, and through my work at Huel, we were creating sustainable food, environmentally sustainable. I mean, And I'm a bit of a science nerd. And I realised I hadn't done my homework on this food and climate change thing. I knew that climate change was probably something we should be worried about, but I'll leave that to everyone else. But as I unravelled the data and looked more at the research, I realised, well, what we eat actually has a really big impact. And actually, it's something we can change. We can actually quite easily change what we eat, still eat a really healthy diet, and have less of an impact. So in 2019, I changed the way I ate to reduce my animal derived calories to around about 10%. Now, I don't walk around with a calculator and a latest app, but roughly I know what that looks like. But also, I started looking at some of the farming systems in the West, and I became quite uncomfortable with some of the intensive animal farms. So I thought, well, if I want to be true to myself, I need to avoid, where I can, intentionally farmed red meat and poultry as well. So that sort of was what I was doing, eating for good health and sports performance as well, of course. Then the pandemic came and we all got a bit bored. I thought I'd do some writing. So I started writing about a load of topics, but I thought, well, what about this diet strategy? What should I call it? So I called it contemplative nutrition, contemplative eating, because I'm thinking about what I'm doing. And that has carried on. That's what I call the strategy within the book, Well Fed. But as I wrote these 3 essays, and then a few months later, I said to my wife, there's something here, there's something a way of eating that addresses everything, not just our personal health, but other things at the same time. I think there's a book here. So I started writing. I thought there's actually not 3, there's 4 pillars. So I subdivided the eating for our physical health to eating for physical health and to our mental health, and then sustainable nutrition, and then ethics. Got about a quarter of the way into the book, and I thought there's actually a 5th pillar here. There has to be, which is not what we eat, it's how we eat and who we eat with. There's cognitive benefits, there's mental health benefits from the concept of meals, sharing our food, preparing food, and there's some loads of great stuff I talk about in the book there. So I started writing the book. This was early 21. Summer 22, I thought I'd finished. Then I went on the whole ordeal of trying to find a publisher. This is new to me, right? Huel was growing. I knew I'd written something good. Had very nearly had a nasty experience with another publisher, but I managed to avoid that. Struggled, got disillusioned, and then I kind of realised that what I was presenting to potential agents and publishers was a synopsis, about a book. Not a proposal. A proposal should be a marketing document. So I got this one guy, Simon Alexander Ong, someone you could possibly think about having on here, and he's all about mindset. If you haven't come across him, I employed his services as a sort of a life coach, but he helped me make my proposal into a proper full-on marketing document. And then he put me in touch with an agent, and within a few weeks I had an agent. This is now early 2024. This is only last year. So I'd got all that period without having with just looking. And then my agent, she's brilliant. And within 5 weeks of her, she got me HarperCollins, who were been absolutely brilliant. And I'd met them on Zoom, and they told me how great it was. They loved my writing. They'd seen my Substack where I write some of my essays, if anyone does want to check out my work. And they'd liked the manuscript and told me how brilliant I was. So then I went to meet my editor in person at the HarperCollins offices in London. And she gave me a print off of my manuscript with a red line through 3 chapters. And when you've been told you're an A-star student at school, and then you come and see teacher in the office, and you come out with a B-, could do better. That's how I felt, right? And so summer went last summer. I had to rewrite a load more. Now, it's not that those 3 chapters were bad. I'm definitely going to use them again one day, but they were off topic. And she was right. So I've written some more. There was going to be 12 chapters. Now there's 11, but I've used some of those bits elsewhere, and I've restructured the book. And there's a whole huge chapter on misinformation where it was only a couple of paragraphs before. And so I think what we've got is a better book. So you asked me what I want from the book. Well, I love writing. The flow state that people find. If I'm in the mood one day and I've done all my other jobs and they're not nagging me, I just write. And sometimes the clock, where does it go? Where does the time go? And structuring it together, it's a bit like a jigsaw to me. Making something good. But if I want to learn about something, I write. Now, you've probably heard the concept where you want to learn, it's good to take notes because it goes in a different way. That's great. But I feel there's a lot more to that as well. You have to commit to publishing something, because if you're going to publish something, you've got to be intellectually on point, because people could criticize you. And if you really value intellectual honesty, you have to hold yourself to a very high account. And so this is why I write and publish, which I do the Substack in the short term, because it helps criticize my ideas. And you've got to be, excuse me, you've got to be prepared that you will get things wrong, and you've got to be okay with that. That's science. Unfortunately, we live in this social media world where if you do one thing wrong, people will attack you. And that's not science. You know, I've actually already had an academic criticism from one of my peers about one part of my book. I got this email through a week ago. Did I feel uncomfortable when I got the email? Of course I did. Was I excited about getting the email? Yes, at the same time, because this is someone I know her anyway. She's a friend, and she's a genuine expert. We're talking about expertise. She's a genuine expert in the narrow field of nutrition, whereas I'm a bit of I've got a wide knowledge base. So I haven't been through her notes in detail yet, but then I'll probably find there's some things that she's probably right on and I've probably not got quite right. But I've got to be okay with that, right? That's science. And frankly, it is only a very small part. And I might present that to someone else and they might have a different opinion. So we've got to embrace that. And that's what writing is about. So I've written the book for me, but I've also written it for everyone else. Now, if I could have written probably an academic book, I probably would have done. But how's that going to help anyone? So what I've written is a book with, it's highly referenced. I think there's about 700 references in there. But I've tried to write it in a very readable fashion. I've been told I'm a good writer. I think I am. If you want to give yourself some praise, I think I can do that. I'm a better writer than I am speaker anyway. And so I am not an academic, as in I don't work in academia, do research. But what my skill probably is being able to pull together other people's work and relay it in a readable fashion. But the other key thing is, you know, there's no way I've got this thing published with HarperCollins if I'd have just written a book that's got a load of information. You have to give key actionable takeaways for people. So that throughout the book, especially at the end of the 5 main chapters, there are actionable takeaways just in bullet points. And then in the final chapter, I've pulled them all together into 20 things that you can do to make better food choices. But what do I mean by better food choices? They're choices that factor in all, you know, like more fiber, more omega-3s and protein, how to do that for your own health, but also that will reflect on the environment as well, and ethics. So and this is one of the key things that I want people to realize, is we are bigger than ourselves. What we eat, our food choices will affect our own health, of course, but they also affect others. And by others, I mean humans and non-humans and the wider environment too. We've got problems with climate change. I know there's a bunch of people who thinks it's a made up thing. Well, just silly. If you look at a critical appraisal of the evidence, there is anthropogenic climate change is a real issue. We know that maybe 25 to 30% of emissions come from the food system. We know that one of the simplest things that we can do is change what we eat. Now, I actually tie myself in a bit of a knot in the last chapter about the question, should, and that's in quotes, humans be vegans? And everybody's going to be disappointed with where I get to on that answer. If you're a vegan, you're going to be disappointed. If you're a meat eater, you're going to be disappointed. And I try and argue the point from a physiological perspective, an anthropological perspective, and crucially, from a philosophical perspective. And I failed to find an answer.
I was going to say, don't tell us the answer.
Yeah.
You've got to read the book to find
You've got to read
out.
the answer, yeah.
Right,
but I think the conundrum that I get myself into is quite interesting. And obviously, sure, it's in the last chapter, but it's built on other bits from around the book. But what I am certain about is we can do better. People that we've got increasing rates of non-communicable diseases and obesity. We've got food-related climate change, and not just climate. I'm talking about land use and water use too. We've got everybody on Earth There's enough calories and protein to go around to feed everybody on Earth. It's not reaching some people, like in Sudan at the moment, for the fourth time in 20 years a famine's been declared. Okay, but that's political reasons. We've got so much food, we're actually throwing a bunch of it away. And that, of course, is wasteful. You know, of an animal to be exploited through intensive farming. It's one thing to eat it, but to just throw it away strikes me as morally questionable. And I know people don't look at it that way. I know people see this as a commodity. They're not seeing it as an animal. And I get that. I'm not trying to be an evangelical activist here who's trying to preach, but there's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance for sure. And if people can just, so my primary goal is this: two things. One is to accept that the food system is complex and to acknowledge that. And there is no black and white thinking. And whatever decision you make is a trade-off. Just acknowledge that point. The second thing is I want people to pause and think just a little about the food choices they're making and the impact they have. Obviously, we don't go to a supermarket and be pondering around, oh, if I eat this. But if I have some more than a benign understanding of the food system, I don't mean anything in depth, but just a bit more than benign, and to make better food choices based on that within their own means. I accept that I'm sitting here in a privileged position preaching to the world, and you've got to accept that and take the humility that comes with that, and that other people aren't so fortunate. And I'm not just talking about in other countries here. I'm talking about here in the UK, where we're maybe hopefully at the tail end of a cost of living crisis. Maybe I'm wrong with that. That's for economists to tell me. But there are certainly people with hardships, and hardships aren't just financial either. Let's be sure on that, right? If you're a single parent and you've never been taught cooking skills because your parents didn't have cooking skills, that's not your fault. Okay. I hear what you're saying about, taking ownership and making an effort. That's really important, but people don't know where effort comes from. Sometimes it's all very well, I'm very fortunate that I can be quite motivated, but where does that motivation to come from? Did I pick it from the motivation tree? No, I didn't. For some reason, I am quite motivated. So you have to have some sort of, I don't like the word empathy, but compassion is a better word, compassion to certain people, and accept that people are going to buy meat because it's cheap and readily available. We've got a problem with, have you heard the term food desert?
No.
So, okay, it's a bigger issue in America, but in some parts of the cities in the UK, it's an issue as well. It's where within a reasonable distance, healthy food is not available. So there might be a little shop that's got fast food, junk foods in it, but there's no fruit and veg or whole grains and things like that. They're just not available, not even tinned legumes or anything like that. So that's the food desert. And there's a lot of this. You've got maybe some flats in some parts of London, and there are shops and they can get calories. There might be even fast food outlets, and you can get a burger for £1, £1.50. So what parents are doing, because they're busy and they're trying to hold their life together, they're sending kids downstairs to these fast food outlets to get some junk food. Now, this is a real problem. And I don't want to be, I don't want anyone listening to this podcast who maybe is struggling to feel like, well, I just can't. The last thing I want to do is make people feel shit about their lives when they're already struggling. So that some of this does need to come from top down, and it also needs to come from sideways. Now, there's a whole political discussion here, and the libertarians listening to this will be shouting at me now. Okay. And there's a lot of right about libertarianism, but there's a lot wrong with libertarianism as well. Okay. Government need to enact more policies, and people brighter than me needs to be the people working on this, but it needs to come from top down. Well, what do I mean by sideways? That's what I'm talking about, business. Okay. Can businesses do better as well? Yes, they can. But, and here there's going to be a slight contradiction in what I've previously said, people too have to take personal responsibility. Okay. Personal responsibility is a term that's thrown around quite a lot. We know that people have harder lives than other people. Through no fault of their own, things are harder. Maybe it's genetics, maybe it's the way people were brought up, maybe it's something else phenotypically. And other people have it easier. But there's one thing I'm very clear about. We certainly shouldn't be blaming others for the circumstances. That's what I mean by taking personal responsibility. It's not blaming. And this is the problem. You've got social media influencers that really get under my skin. who go out there and they're black and white thinking, eat this, eat that, talking in absolutes, which is a watch out for someone giving questionable advice, blaming big food, and they're out to get you, they're lying to you. It's not like that. Sure, does capitalism come in and financial incentives? Absolutely. And there's a lot to be challenged there. But the government need to be taking, the governments, I should say, let's not keep this UK centric here. Governments of the world need to be taking ownership of this, as does the food industry, as do the individuals, okay, to make better food choices. Now, fortunately, there are more options becoming available, but wouldn't it be nice if fruit and veg were subsidised and readily available and easy for people to acquire?
Really, really good content, and I love it, and I love how passionate you are about it. Just a little bit of conscious of time. So one thing I want to pick up on and finish on, you had a positive childhood, but you've gone on and you've succeeded. We're putting that word success, but you have gone on and achieved. People will watch lots of podcasts, lots of YouTubes, and watch this. They'll take it all in, and then they'll just go away and go, oh, well, I'm just going to carry on. And it's all right for James. He's there. So you've been there. You've seen success. You seem to have things in place. And you talk about you had your issues with depression years ago, but you've worked and worked and worked. What little snippets, 1, 2, 3 bits of advice would you give to somebody who's watching this type of podcast to try and gain some momentum within their own lives? You're achieving. You've published a book. What would you give them as a bit of advice?
I'm going to answer that, but first I'm going to answer it by challenging something you said. You said I had a positive childhood. What's a positive childhood? I lived with my mum with terminal breast cancer for 11 years. I had issues with depression and nervous tics. I was bullied at school. Sure, it was positive. I had some great friends, especially out of school, and one particular guy in school as well, actually, if he ever listens to this. I did have a lot of positivity. I had great parents who, my dad's been supportive to me all my life. So I had positives, but wasn't all positive, right?
I need to go back. You're right. My phrasing of that was wrong. You have, and you're exactly right. And I should be, whether it doesn't matter whether I'm criticised for that, but that's the reality of this type of no. But that's this type of podcast. We should be honest with each other. And I should have said you've taken positives from that and then built. But I'm not. You were right. I worded it wrong. And no, but I love the fact that you pulled me up on that, because that's what I want this podcast to be about. This is not all about woolly la la, let's all be happy. It's reality. We get it wrong sometimes. So you've taken positives. What advice would you give?
I try to live my life as honest as possible. Now, the word honest is it's probably more of a fluid term, right? We could definitely not lie. A lie is an intentional deceit. We know we're doing it. The term bullshit, as defined by the philosopher Harry Frankfurt in the 80s, is different from lying. And I think this is important to acknowledge. The bullshitter doesn't care about the truth. The liar and the truth teller cares about the truth. They have that thing in common. The bullshitter, let's take Donald Trump, who's a classic bullshitter, for instance, and I'm not being political here. Even if you're a big fan of him, you've got to admit he's a bullshitter. He has no regard for the truth. Some of what comes out of a bullshitter's mouth might be true, but they don't care about the truth. So what you've got to try to do is definitely not lie, and try your hardest not to bullshit, being mindful that you might actually accidentally do it sometime due to social pressure. Now, if you try to live your life honestly as possible, people will trust you more. They might not even consciously know that sometimes you've told untruths or bullshitted, but I think there's something that we kind of detect people do. So the first bit of advice would be just try to be honest, at least be honest with yourself and be open. And like, we had a respectful challenge there, Cliff, on something you said, right? That's good. That's part of that's being authentic. So authenticity, first one. The second one is, I think it's compassion again. And I paused earlier when I nearly used the word empathy. I'm always cautious of empathy. Empathy is a good thing, right? By and large. But generally it's a one-on-one interaction. I've got empathy for you and I'm feeling your pains. You kind of take it on, and it can be negative. Compassion, I feel, is a better word, because it's more stand back. You can take it more at a distance, and you can be compassionate to a wider range of people. So if someone's going through something, or a group of people are going through something, you can listen to them and you can hear, and you can try and acknowledge what they're going through, but you're not taking it, and you're not being disingenuous either. So I think that's another one. The other one is habits. I mentioned this earlier. I'm a big fan of habits, and what I call micro habits, which are probably similar to James Clear's atomic habits. I set myself little micro habits every day, and I don't wake up and say, right, today, I might be thinking, okay, I'm sitting down reading my book now for an hour. I want to get to X page by this time. Knuckle down and do it. I mean, I read a lot and I get through a lot. But that's because I commit a lot of time to it. I'm not a fast reader. I envy some of these people that can look at a page and absorb it all. I'm not one of them. So I have to set myself goals. And another thing, like the training, going to the gym X times a week, that's another habit. I'm going to go for a 15-minute run 4 times in a week. That's another one that I'm currently trying to work on. And that's irrespective of the time. And you've got to try and find no excuses for that. So habits, but be prepared that habits, you shouldn't bring them all in at one time. They've got to be brought in a structured way. So authenticity, compassion, and habits.
What a wonderful way to finish. Thank you. But where do they find you, James? Where do they find the book? Where do they find you? Where can they find more about you?
The book Well Fed is available on all major booksellers online and hopefully in stores. For example, Amazon, Waterstones, WH Smith's bookstore, etc. It's available on audio as well, and you can listen to me in your ears if you're struggling to sleep at night. I narrated that. By the way, I've got a newfound respect for people who narrate books. It's hard. And they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm quite prevalent on LinkedIn, also on Instagram. I am on some of the others as well. But also, if they want to read my work, I urge people to go to my Substack. That's where I post my essays. And pour my thoughts, and I want people to leave feedback there.
James, thank you very much. That was exactly what I wanted to be. It was finding out the story, but really finding about you and listening to a real person who's gone through things and achieved or successful, but has been very honest about their views on things. And that's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, James.
Thanks for having me. I hope people can get something out of this.
Thank you for listening to the Magical Mindset Podcast. Please subscribe, leave a review, share around your network. I'm Cliff Sewell. See you next time.